Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Viking Codecast. My name is Art Troutman, founder of Viking Code School, and we're here live with Gerard O'Neill, who is a developer over at Trello. He's previously worked at Etsy and a number of other places in his career so far, and basically he's here with us as part of our Codecast series where we have regular conversations with professional developers about topics around the industry that are relevant to you trying to get into the industry. So, generally the idea is to just make it an open conversation. It is designed to be a two-way conversation, so we have chat features and we have question and answer features enabled here in the webinar. And if this is something that you're seeing for the first time on YouTube later, feel free to go over to vikingcodeschool.com or reach out directly to hello@vikingcodeschool if you have any questions. But for now, Gerard, it's great to have you with us, and I'd love to hear a little bit from you about who you are and what's brought you to us.
Yeah. So hey everyone. Again, my name's Gerard. Currently a software engineer at Trello, where I work mostly on the front end of the web application. So I guess I'll sort of talk about how I got to where I am now. I'll try to give like the briefest possible history of myself. I started studying at Rutgers University computer science in 2009, and I studied there for 4 years. I had a few like part-time jobs with some small local companies after my sophomore year of college. After my junior year, I was an intern at Thrillist. If anyone's ever heard of them, they also, at the time, ran jackthreads.com, if anyone's heard of that as well. And I actually worked part-time for them as well during my senior year of college. And then after graduating in 2013, I joined Etsy full-time. And I worked there for about 3 years, and then my girlfriend got a job over in LA, and I needed to move. So now I'm in LA, where I work remotely for Trello, and I've been here for a few months. So yeah, that's me. That's my history.
So I know that you've also done a lot of work in hackathons along the way, and you've done a lot of mentorship. You're a mentor with Viking. And so I guess one of the topics that we'd mentioned about trying to cover for today was the idea of developer communities, and specifically as someone who's relatively new to the craft of development, who maybe doesn't have a local community, or if you do have a local community, maybe who just doesn't really know about it, isn't automatically integrated, didn't kind of go through the traditional developer path. And wants to be a part of these communities. What role have these group events and the communities that you've been involved with played in your development, both as a developer and also as a mentor alongside it?
Yeah. So that's actually a great question. I kind of skipped over all of that, but so I got involved with the computer science club at Rutgers during my sophomore year, which is when I decided that I wasn't doing enough to reach my goals of being like a good developer. I was going to graduate college being a very, very mediocre developer at best, if I continued on my path. So I hung out with sort of, the saying goes, you are the average of your 5 closest friends or whatever. So I started becoming friends with people who were much better at programming than I was. And they actually inspired me to become a peer leader, also known as a TA for the Intro to Computer Science course, which is where I learned that I like teaching and I like mentoring. So I actually did that until the first semester, or I guess until the second semester of senior year of college, which is when I stopped doing it. So I taught all of those semesters, sometimes even 2 classes, and that was great. That was a great experience. I think I got really good at teaching and just explaining beginner concepts to people, which is sort of what led me to eventually teach at General Assembly part-time while I was at Etsy, and now being a mentor for Viking Code School. Um, so, in terms of like community, the Computer Science Club helped me sort of realize where I stood in like the spectrum of skill, and it sort of paved the way for me to get more involved with other communities. So my friends and I, my new friends from the Computer Science Club, we would start going to these things called hackathons. And if you haven't heard of what a hackathon is, or if you don't know what it is, haven't heard of them before, they're basically these events, usually spanning anywhere from like 12 to 48 hours, depends on the type of hackathon. And you go to these events and you basically attempt to create an app within that time frame. And there are different themes. Some of them are like civic hackathons, and others are like green energy hackathons. But some of them are just do whatever you want hackathons. So you can sort of build whatever you want, and those are my favorite. So I've been to a lot of hackathons before, and I've met tons of people, and I think it's a great way to meet people. Um, I've, let's see, I actually technically went to my 41st hackathon a couple of nights ago, but I didn't stay the whole time, so I'm not going to count it. The other 40, I've stayed most of the time, if not the entire time. Um, I should say, however, everyone likes hackathons. You don't have access to a shower typically. Sometimes you can't like go home because you live far away. It's not the most pleasant experience for some people. So I would recommend like if you're not a fan of hackathons, then try attending something like meetups, and just do your best to meet people and keep in touch with them and bounce ideas off people, learn from them, teach them, and just sort of get more involved with the community, and you'll see lots of benefits are to be reaped from that.
So if you're coming into a hackathon, I guess there are probably two reasons why students might go into a hackathon, and I suspect one of them is for the pure love and joy of building, wanting to build stuff and find other people who like to build stuff, and then another one is potentially to find people who might be helpful to know, like to get a job and things like that. Um, what what are kind of the best motivate like I kind of want to say what are the best motivations for going to a hackathon, or I guess maybe it's I guess you've clearly seen a lot if you've been to that many, and I guess like how do you ultimately be successful in a hackathon, whether your goal is purely just to build things or also to get to know other people and to be a little bit more social.
Yeah, for sure. So I think there are definitely there are four types of people who go to hackathons just off the top of my head. There are, like what you said, the people who go and they just want to build something and they have fun. Um, there are the people who go because they really want to win whatever the prize is or the prize is. Sometimes there are corporate sponsors that provide their own special prizes, and then other times there's like tons of money involved, up to like tens of thousands of dollars. It's kind of ridiculous. Um, Then there are the networkers who come and mostly just try to network with people. Um, and then the fourth type is the kind that just comes and gets the free food and doesn't really do anything the entire time. So those
The
are the four
loafers.
types. Yeah, exactly. I would say it is best to be the first type, the passionate, I'm just going to go and try to have fun and meet people person. If you come off as like too networky, people aren't gonna respond well to that, or at least not the people you want to talk to, the ones who are passionate, because uh, I mean, I don't know if everyone's had this experience yet, but you'll find that as somebody with highly marketable and desired and in-demand skills, there are going to be a lot of people who try to befriend you or uh, become your associate so that they can tap into those skills. And over time, it gets very, very annoying. Um, Even though it's a great problem to have, when you have people like coming at you like mosquitoes, You don't want that at a hackathon where you're trying to have fun. So try not to be one of those people. And it's a bit harder to be one of those people if you yourself are a programmer, but it is possible. And I've encountered it before. So if you are going to these events, just, be genuine, try to have fun, and, that'll be the best way to accomplish whatever you want, whether it's prizes or networking or whatever. Um, so yeah.
I guess we'd be remiss in a discussion about hackathons without me asking what are the secrets to winning a hackathon?
I wish I knew. um, about half of the hackathons I've been to, I've actually just been a mentor for. I've sort of slowed down my participation since graduating college, mostly because it's a bit more difficult to find post-college hackathons where you can compete. So I go to a lot of like collegiate and high school hackathons, and I mentor for them. Um, but yeah, when I was competing a lot, I would say out of the 20 or 25 or so that I've competed in, I've probably won a single prize at three of them. So I definitely don't have the formula for winning. But I will say that if you are going to one of these events, you should try not to aim too high, especially if it's sometime in your first five hackathons. I'm actually, since I've been to so many, like if someone tells me an idea, I can immediately say like, no, you can't do that in this time frame, or yes, you can. Um, and a lot of people try to go too big and then they don't make anything. So focus on like something simple, try to get it done like as quickly as possible, because you'll realize that, if you think you have 2 hours left, you actually have the rest of the time plus a few hours, if you know what I mean, left before it's even workable. And don't try to like worry about the code quality or anything, just like bang out tons of code. Make sure it sort of works enough for a demo and do a good job presenting it. Presentation is actually a huge part of hackathons, which is kind of cruddy, like if you are just going there to try to have fun, but it's actually a good skill to have if you can learn how to present, public speaking and all that. I actually got a lot better at it after attending hackathons, so yeah, it's great.
So if your goal, kind of on the flip side, if your goal of going to the hackathon, yes, you want to have fun, but at the same time, coming back to this idea of communities and thinking about, wanting to get some sort of stickiness or permanence with a developer community, what strategies would you have or mindsets would you have going in where someone could theoretically walk out, maybe having made some friends, maybe having gotten to know a mentor a little bit better, or things like that. I get, so sort of instead of just going in, putting your head down, building something, getting up and leaving, like how can you use this as a a stepping stone into getting to know more developers and feeling like more a part of the overall community?
Yeah. Um, so I think some people have success with sort of teaming up with strangers to work on a project together. And I'm sure that after spending anywhere between 24 to 48 hours with complete strangers, you'll probably come out like either liking or hating them. But assuming you like them, you'll probably keep up with them in some way. So you might add them on Facebook or follow them on Twitter, get their email, business card, something. And you could just follow up with them and maybe try to meet up at another hackathon or work together on a side project or continue working on the hackathon project, which is what a lot of people do. Um, and um, what was I going to say? Oh, the success that I've mostly come across has been with being a mentor. So um, how do I phrase this? So I just talk to people a lot. Like if I'm a mentor and somebody needs my help, I talk with them, I goof off with them, and then they follow me on Twitter or something. And I've actually, it's actually funny because I've met uh, a lot of people at the same hackathons over and over, and like every time I see them, like just try to remember their name or something, and if not, just be goofy or something. That's my strategy, but I'll just talk to them. And like there's this one guy, for example, every time he went to a hackathon, he built something crazy. Like he tried to build a plane once. And he had like this piece of silicon where it was like attached to hardware, and he like put it on his tongue. Like he was doing something weird with it. But like I always remember him because of that. And then when we see each other, like we always talk. And a few other people who I still keep in contact with, through Facebook and Twitter and whatnot. So I think definitely working with strangers and also helping people. Even if you're not a mentor, like if you think you can help somebody solve something, they'll be grateful. They'll remember you. Um, so yeah.
So, so we do have a question from the audience. And by the way, you can just ask a question right in, and there should be a Q&A thing in your panel there. But for you, Gerard, the question is basically, what does your coding skill level have to be in order to participate?
Uh, Way less than you probably think. That's a great question. I would say if you're interested in going, go as soon as you can. You don't have to have any kind of skill level. In fact, at Rutgers, the school I went to, I actually once helped this guy build an app. He came into the hackathon with no programming experience. He did not study computer science. He was an engineering major. Um, and I mean, maybe it's unfair to say he had no programming experience. He did some MATLAB, if anyone's familiar with that. But it's basically sort of like a mathematical programming language that engineers use. But it's not at all like Ruby or Python or JavaScript, as far as I know. I think Eric studied engineering. Maybe he can verify. Um, but so he essentially did not have much coding experience at all, and he ended up building something where it sent a text message to you if something. I forgot the exact app, but he won a prize for it. So someone came in, they knew virtually nothing, and they came out with a prize, and more than the prize, they had an app that they were able to use and say, hey, I built this. So I definitely would not be discouraged to go to a hackathon regardless of your skill level. Unless you really want to win a prize and you want to like go to a hackathon and win first place the first time. Um, but I mean, even that is difficult no matter how skilled you are if you've never been to a hackathon before. So yeah, just go, just dive in. There's nothing to be afraid of, really. And I should point out, it seems maybe like a scary thing. You're hearing me talk about prizes and presentations and whatnot, but if you don't feel comfortable presenting, or if you didn't finish building what you wanted to build, like you don't have to. You can just go and build whatever you want and choose not to present. I would recommend presenting, especially if you finished, but it's not mandatory, and you don't have to feel like ashamed of what you built or inferior. Like it, people go there to have fun and to learn. So if that's what you're doing, then you're doing a good job.
So we talked about hackathons a fair bit, and you mentioned a little bit earlier about meetups, and obviously meetup.com has made it really easy for anyone pretty much anywhere to set up a community, and there are huge communities in the larger cities. Um, but I guess, do you think that going out to meetups as a young developer is a useful and productive thing to do? And if so, I mean, what could they get out of that? Maybe not a young developer, but an aspiring developer or
Yeah.
a junior developer.
That's a good question. I'm not sure if I have a great answer because I don't attend a lot of them. I know people who do. Um, I don't know if I know any junior developers who attend a lot. Um, the issue with me is I'm not. Meetups are sort of more typically like a traditional networking style where you're like in a room with a bunch of strangers, and uh, the there might be like drinks or something, but like essentially all you're doing is talking to other people. Um, but I'm not as good as that as a lot of other people at that. So I'm not 100% sure how useful it would be, but there have been times that I've gone to meetups and met people who were relatively junior. I can't really ask them if they benefited from talking to me, but it's totally a thing that people do go to, or they are things people go to. Um, but yeah, I think it's at least helpful to like see people present, if there are presentations, and sort of like widen like your vocabulary or like your knowledge of uh, technology, because a lot of meetups they'll have like, for example, lightning talks or something, or people presenting their side projects or uh, stuff like that. So, you can, like, if you see something you like in terms of a side project or a technology, and there's someone there who can talk to you about it, like you can talk to them. But yeah, I mean, I think it's useful. But I personally don't have like as much experience, so it's hard for me to like give concrete examples, unfortunately.
What about other communities? I mean, again, just in the sense of, like what's helped you grow as a developer? I mean, are there other communities aside from? It sounds like the hackathon community is a really good one that you've really sort of dip back into, both as a participant and as a mentor. But are there other areas where you found people that you can give back to, or that you've gotten a lot of value from being a part of?
Yeah. So in terms of getting value from, I sort of do that on a more passive level, I would say, like in terms of like using online resources such as Hacker News, or Reddit. So I might like browse those type of things and like read the discussions, but not really involve myself much, because I don't like to argue with people, especially over technology. But uh, in terms of giving back, I think I have a lot more experience with that. Like as I mentioned before, I've taught twice at General Assembly, the competing one of the competitors of Viking Code School. So I taught a part-time course on front-end web development for them, and I did keep in touch with a fair number of my students. And actually, one of them I video chatted with recently, and he was telling me how he decided to go to a programming boot camp full time, and now he's like on a job hunt. And we were talking about, you know, what that would entail, and he was asking me about, my experience with boot campers and um, just my experience in general. So yeah, I think in terms of like giving back to the community, like being a mentor at hackathons or being a mentor for a code school or a part-time teacher or even a full-time teacher, basically anything where you're mentoring or teaching people, can have huge benefits. I mean, I guess you'll mostly sort of be interacting with people who, you know, by definition have less experience than you, but it's not a bad thing at all. And sort of teaching these concepts actually reinforces the concepts in your mind, especially over time. So you get more and more familiar with things that you thought you were already super familiar with. And it just gives you a wider network of people that you can reach out to for anything, and who will reach out to you as well.
Cool. So we do have a few more questions about hackathons. I think I'd actually, I'll shelve those if we have some time at the end. Maybe we can circle back to hackathons. But another thing that we talked about, which I guess is sort of related to the idea of hackathons, is technology stacks, right? Is when you're a beginner, you need to rely on communities and people around you to sort of fill in a lot of the fuzzy gaps. But at some point, you need to also get your head down and learn some hard skills. And one of the hardest questions that everybody seems to run into is how do I actually figure out what I'm supposed to learn? I mean, right now we're living in just the JavaScript area is just exploding in a million different directions. Everyone has a strong opinion about why you should use a very particular thing, and they're all completely different. I mean, so as a junior, how do you figure out what it is that you should be learning, how you should be learning it, and Where do we go from there?
Yeah. Um, so I would say, in my experience, a lot of junior developers sort of run into this trap where they think they need to learn everything. And I've actually been in that spot before as well, where people think that, oh, I need to be good at React, and I need to be good at Angular, and I need to be good at Ember, and this one job said they want backbone experience, so I need to learn that as well. And then on the back end, I need to know like Rails, Sinatra, Flask, Django, PHP, like all these different things, but you don't. In fact, I would say that as a junior developer, uh, stick to just one stack and preferably the one that you're most comfortable with or that you're most excited about, and just keep building more like increasingly complex things with it. Like I read this great quote on Hacker News recently. I don't think the person on Hacker News came up with it. They quoted someone else, but I forget. But they said like 10 years of experience is not the same as 1 year of experience 10 times or something. And and what it means is basically like you want to keep getting more and more advanced at becoming a software engineer rather than trying to learn all these different technologies because there's a huge difference. Um, I've seen friends of mine, like back in the college days, like I said, falling into this trap where, one week they would be like, oh yeah, I'm working on this project in Ruby, and then like 2 weeks later they'd be like, oh no, forget Ruby, I'm using, a month later they're like, I've switched to Clojure, and then like a year goes by and they have zero projects to show for it, or they might have like a few tiny projects. Um, so I would say it seems like most of you are learning like Rails and Angular. Um, if you were to build a side project, the first thing I would ask yourself, or the first thing I would ask myself is, do I need a front end framework? Like, is what I'm building okay to build with just Rails? Like, do I need to have a web application, or can it be like a traditional website? And if you can get by with just a traditional website, I would say do that because that's the like path of least resistance. And then like the next time you build a side project, once that one's like done enough to, your satisfaction, build something more complex and keep making it more and more complex over time. And eventually you might decide, okay, well, this project I actually do need a front-end framework because it's super interactive and I don't want the page refreshing. I think that would lead to a bad user experience. And then build something with Angular, which is what you'll know best, most likely. Um, and you'll find that, if you're applying to a job where they don't use Rails or they don't use Angular or they don't use either of those, that because you'll have the experience with Rails and Angular, you can actually apply that to whatever you learn next. So, like, it doesn't matter if you don't know Python and Django, for example. If you've done Ruby and Rails, you know what a variable is, you know what an if statement is, you know what controllers and templates are, you know what templating languages are, right? So all you have to do is like learn the little details in order to switch to a different technology stack. But what's more important is the concepts and how everything fits together. It doesn't have to do as much with the exact keys you're typing so much as how you approach problems. So I would definitely recommend, don't fall into the trap of, I need to learn all these different things, the flavor of the week JavaScript framework or anything. Just stick to what you know, stick to what's the path of least resistance, and over time, the concepts will come more naturally to you, and you'll be able to pick up so many more technologies later. Like it's sort of like learning Latin and then being able to learn Spanish, French, Italian super easily. Like as long as the concepts are there, like you're good to go.
Right. Get fluent in one of them before you move on to any of the other ones.
Exactly.
Well, so you also recently changed your tech stack, right? In terms of in your job. right? Etsy, they were Rails, right?
No, so Etsy's actually PHP.
Etsy,
Uh,
oh, Etsy's PHP and Trello is JavaScript based, right?
yeah.
So how was that? I mean, did you know JavaScript moving in, and then I guess like how does this practically affirm what you were just discussing in terms of being able to transition?
Yeah. So, so I'll call Thrillist my first real job because I was uh, doing sort of more complex things there. So I'll start from Thrillist. Uh, Thrillist.com was written in PHP, but they use Drupal. And I actually didn't work on the Drupal side too much. I mostly worked on sort of like internal tools where I didn't need to touch it, thankfully. Um, but I did, and so HTML, CSS, JavaScript. Um, and I was also working on Jackthreads, which is written in Cake PHP, which is like this ancient PHP framework that I would never recommend anyone use. Um, but I had already programmed with other PHP frameworks before, so a controller is a controller, a model is a model, a template is a template, and PHP doesn't change. So I'd worked in that stuff before, so it sort of just like came naturally to me. I just needed to figure out like where things were and like the sort of built-in libraries that come with Cake PHP. But other than that, like I felt mostly at home. And then when I went to Etsy, doing more full stack development, Etsy is actually so old that they don't use a like an open source PHP framework. They have their own sort of. But again, like because I already knew PHP, it was just PHP, and I learned the stack. But at the end of the day, they did have controllers, they had models, they had templates, so there was nothing for me to worry about. I just had to learn like little details, and then it came naturally after that. Uh, my team at Etsy did not use a front end framework, so I was just writing like normal jQuery, JavaScript type stuff. Etsy's not a single page app, so there wasn't super complex stuff going on there for the most part. Um, and then moving to Trello, I'm only working on the front end of Trello, and I'm working in ES6 and React, so and Redux, the typical thing nowadays for a lot of startups. And I played with React a little bit before going into Trello, but not a lot. And but once you like sort of read up on it and you have some experience with other frameworks, it just comes naturally to you, and you learn the little details, and you're productive within a week, if not less. So yeah, it's really not difficult. I applied to other jobs where they had different tech stacks, and they were okay with that. That's another thing I should mention is that some companies will say like, oh, we're looking for someone with X years of experience in some technology. You could just usually feel free to ignore that. I do, and it's worked fine for me. I think most reputable companies will know that if you can program in one language, there is nothing stopping you from programming in another language in a short amount of time. I mean, if you can learn Ruby, you can learn Python. If you learn Python, you can learn PHP. If you learn any of those, you can learn JavaScript or Scala or Clojure or Haskell or whatever a company decides they want to use. It's not like some people can not learn a language. And companies know that. And companies know that uh, it's, you're not going to be super productive on day one. Like you're going to need to set things up on your computer, and you're going to have to like learn the code base a little bit. So they know that like they're investing in you for a little bit of time before you become productive, and it's not a big deal. So yeah, I wouldn't worry about it.
Speaking of that learning process, what do you have a process right now for picking up a new language? Like, I mean, how did you end up picking up React, getting on the job, learning a new code base, diving into things like that?
Yeah, that's a good question. So actually, Trello was sort of unique in that regard. They gave us a subscription to egghead.io, which has a bunch of lessons, I would say. I wouldn't call them classes, more like video tutorials on a bunch of tech stacks. They actually have a lot of Angular videos, but the one I did was React, and it's uh, the one that I was watching specifically was taught by the guy who built Redux, which we also use at Trello. So that was pretty fun. But yeah, I did those in like a week or two. And I didn't have to watch the entire thing to like look at the code base. But it's a lot of asking questions, and sometimes you'll even have somebody like walk you through the code base. It all depends on the company, I would say. When it came to Etsy, they did something different. Obviously, there's nowhere I could watch a video tutorial on how to program in Etsy's custom framework. So what they do at Etsy is on the first day you get to push code. So someone's gonna like help you do what you have to do, which is like putting your face on the team page, and then they walk you through the deploy process and everything. So that's how you sort of like get your toes wet. And then they've changed this recently, but in my case, 3 years ago, they had they had new hires do this thing called boot camp. So in my case, it was like every week for 4 weeks, I switched to a different team. So I got familiar with different parts of the stack. Like I was on the DevTools team for a week. So I was like working on the deploying software that we used, they use. And at one point, I was on the core team, so I was working on the team that like managed the ORM, which in Rails is Active Record. At Etsy, it's again something completely custom. So you get sort of access to these different parts of the code base, and you have somebody there the whole time, like giving you very simple tickets to solve, and you get to ask them questions and whatnot. So I learned a lot of the code base that way. Um, but yeah, typically, again, any reputable company is going to have some kind of onboarding process, and you'll just pick it up.
Unless it's a small startup, in which case they're all
Yeah,
running around with their hair on fire.
exactly.
So just a reminder for everyone who's out there, if you guys have any questions, anything about technology, about communities, feel free to use the Q&A in the app. So happy to get to those. It might actually be worth. So we do have a question in the queue about hackathons, which is sort of, maybe we could call it a transition from tech stacks. But in terms of winning hackathons, the question is what tends to win in terms of testing? Is it an above average app with full test coverage, or an excellent app with few bugs here and there, and not a whole lot of test coverage?
That's a good question. I don't think I've ever written a test at a hackathon. Um, I remember reading something. I think it might have been a specific hackathon where they like took a survey of who tested their apps, and I think it was like the people who programmed in Ruby tested their apps and nobody else did, or something. Like it was very black and white. But I think typically I would say, I mean, again, I have not won very many hackathons. I think I came in first place once. There were definitely no tests for that. Um, but I think it's somewhat rare. Some people do it. I think it all depends on the person. Like if I'm not exactly the type of person who is more productive writing tests first and doing like the traditional red-green TDD. Um, I typically like get my hands dirty a little bit, and then I write tests and come up with more edge cases and make sure things fail. So I have sort of a different process, and it works better for me in my experience. But I would say I think, especially most of the hackathons I've been to have been collegiate or high school hackathons. people don't write tests in college or in high school. So I'm not sure about the sort of grown-up hackathons. Even then, I would say it's probably relatively rare, just given um, the time constraint uh, and yeah, and people probably don't write code as quickly with tests unless that's your coding style. But I think it's a bit more rare. Um, yeah, I think that answers the question. I hope.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and we do have another question that actually bounces us back over to Trello. Someone is actually curious about remote work at Trello. And so what actually is the typical day of a remote worker for Trello?
So it's actually a bit different per person, I would say. Trello doesn't have any sort of restrictions except that you're online between the hours of 12 and 4 Eastern time because they're in New York. I personally choose to do my best to work East Coast hours. So I'm on my computer and working pretty much every day at 8 a.m. And I stop working at around 4. So that gives me like, an 8-hour day with time overlap between the East Coasters. I mean, most of my day is overlapped with them. Um, so it's pretty awesome in my opinion. I love remote work. I don't have to worry about like getting ready in the morning. I mean, I do to an extent, but not. I don't have a commute, and I don't have to like worry about cooking my lunch the night before or anything because my kitchen's right there. So instead of like going out and waiting for lunch for 30 minutes and then eating it, like I can just cook it during my lunch break. And yeah, it's great. There's more flexibility, and yeah, I mostly communicate to people through Slack, but we also do have webcam chats. It's a bit rare. Trello also doesn't have a lot of meetings. That's one thing I've noticed from switching uh, from a company that is mostly not remote, which is Etsy, to switching to Trello is Trello doesn't believe in having lots of meetings. I used to have like at least one meeting every day at Etsy, and now I have one a week or something. So it's really nice. I get a lot more work done that way. Um, I suspect there will be more meetings eventually, but as of now, not too many. Um, yeah, I don't really know what else to say besides that. It's mostly the same thing, except instead of being around people who may or may not be loud, I'm in uh, I'm in the comfort of my own apartment, and I type to people instead of talk to them in person. But other than that, not too much has changed.
How do you know what to work on?
Sorry, what was it?
How do you actually know what to work on?
So we use Trello to track everything. So if I went to my Trello right now, there would be what we call a card or a task with my face on it. And we also, part of like the few meetings that we do have is talking about like who's going to work on what next. But for the most part, at least on the project I'm working on, it's sort of like if you want to take something and it hasn't been taken yet, then put your face on it and then you get to work on it. Um, so yeah, it's pretty much up to me.
How does the review process work? So I mean, do you because I am a little curious to dig deeper into the daily life of you. Like do you come in the morning and you already have like do you guys use agile stories? Like do you sort of know a thing the story that you're working on and you just know that that'll take you till noon and then you just like pop one right off the next one with your face on it off the list, or how does the cycle actually work?
Yeah, so I don't think I've ever really done the traditional agile, like I don't really know what a story or an epic is or anything like that, or the point system. I don't really know all those phrases, but um, essentially you just work on, so we have like we do like the Kanban board thing with Trello. So we have like a done column, or we have a merged column, I guess, and a column that's in progress and what's next, and then there's a backlog. Um, so if you have something in progress, then that's what you're working on, and you just keep working on it until you're done. Um, and then when you're done, you push it to um, a branch on GitHub and create a pull request, assign somebody to the pull request, maybe more than one person if it's a big change or a change that you think more than one person should see. But for the most part, it's just one person. And you sort of like just choose whoever you think is best to review the code. So whoever is like more familiar with that code, uh, or if everyone's familiar with it, then you might just round robin it and pick at random, sort of. And then if they have issues with any of your code, they'll write it in the GitHub pull request comments. And if not, then they'll approve the changes, and then whenever you're free, you can just merge them.
Cool. So I just want to make one last call for questions, and otherwise, I'd like to move into our finale here. I want to be respectful of your time, especially on the East Coast. And really, the last question is always the same, which is if you are sitting in the seat of somebody watching you right now, so a younger version of you, maybe less experienced version of you, whatever you want to say, who's interested in the seat that you are in, right? Like working at a cool company like Trello, having done what you're doing. What's the advice that you have for them to best use their time between now and then to sort of make that happen?
I guess that sort of depends on which version of me. Um, I guess I can have different answers for different Gerards.
I'm interested in this, yeah.
Yeah.
Is there good Gerard and bad Gerard?
Oh yeah. So bad Gerard was sophomore year of college, first semester and before. I was very, very cocky about my programming skills, which I now know were lack of programming skills. So I wasn't doing super great in school, but I also wasn't really working on anything outside of school. It was sort of like, I'll do my programming assignments, but other than that, I'm just gonna have fun and enjoy college, which, you can do, but I didn't realize at the time that in order to be a successful computer science student who's going to work at like a good tech company, where they're going to pay you a lot of money, I didn't realize like I needed to learn more than what they were teaching me at school. I was learning just Java, which again, you don't have to like worry about the tech stack at all, but like it wasn't like I was learning how to build anything significant. I was learning how to build command line apps to solve like computer science problems, which is important to an extent, but it's not going to get you Google outside of college immediately. So it was a huge wake-up call when I was seeing my friends like getting internships and building web applications and mobile applications, and I was just like, what? Like, how did you learn how to do that? So if I could go back to like, let's say freshman year Gerard, I would be like, you're not good at programming. I don't know why you think you are. And I would like, give him suggestions on how to improve outside of the classroom and in the classroom, like take your study seriously, because I wasn't. And that was a big mistake on my part. I had to make up for it later on, especially when it came to like data structures, and algorithms and that kind of stuff. I did poorly in that class. So, um, so that's what I would tell that Gerard. Um, I think post sophomore year Gerard, I would probably say uh, sort of less on like the work aspect and like the learning aspect. I would probably uh, explain to him that he was not super kind to people, in sort of like a welcoming sense. I never really realized it back then, but I could be a bit abrasive, especially to people with less experience than I had. I sort of like had this attitude where, I mean, and it was usually joking, but it didn't always come across as joking to people. And I think it sort of like undid some of what I would gain in terms of community and friendships and whatnot. Like if I saw somebody who was not using Vim, for example, I would be like, "Why aren't you using Vim?" Like, and you know, and I would just like sometimes taunt them about it, and again in a joking way, but it wasn't a good thing for me to do in hindsight. Like it didn't make people feel welcome. Um, and I think that there were like some people who didn't like me because of it, or maybe just not as much as they could have. So you know, it was important. It's important to like when you have experience to be welcoming to beginners and like realize that there are different ways of approaching a single problem and there are different tools that different people use and like not to have sort of like the superiority complex and you'll come across as like a friendlier, better person. And you know, and that does translate to like getting ahead in terms of your professional life for you know for a number of reasons. But most importantly, people will like you more. So that's what I would probably tell that Gerard, because he was killing it in terms of the technical stuff, but in terms of like being a good guy to people who had less experience, he was not. So I had to learn that later on.
It's like two sides of. I think everyone who's been learning has seen both of those in action at some
Yeah.
point, either on Hacker News comments, Stack Overflow feedback and comments, or something along those lines. Well, but I'm glad that you're now good, Gerard, and and that
We'll
you're with
see.
us, and better Gerard, and that you shared with us tonight also your experience. So thank you very much for taking part. Thank you everyone else who's out there. If you do have any questions, Gerard, how might they reach out to you if they wanted to say thank you?
I mean, so I've got the Slack open. If you want to message me there, if you want to tweet me or something, I'm GRARDB, which I think is the same thing as my Slack name. Yeah,
Great.
I'm always around some sort of internet connected device, so hit me up.
All right. Well, thank you for it. For everyone else, this is the Viking Codecast signing off. Thanks a lot.
See ya.